What's up, my biker friends, and welcome back to another video. For those of you guys that follow the channel know that I experienced a critical engine damage on this motorcycle in September of 2023. This video is about what happened, especially what happened afterwards with the KTM service and the takeaways from that incident. So let's start from the beginning. I was on my way down to Munich in September. The idea was to participate in the Trans-Italia Marathon. The Trans-Italia Marathon is a rally-like event over 4 days in Italy. It's an off-road event, and it's the first time I've ever experienced that. So that was my first event going down. And then the second part of the trip was the trips through the Alps with Stefan and a bunch of friends. So that was the initial plan. This was day number 1 for me to go from Berlin to Munich, and this is basically where it happened. 30 kilometers north of Munich, my engine basically disintegrated at 190 kilometers an hour. I was going on the left lane on the A9. The A9 is one of the busiest autobahns. It's basically the north-south connection, and it takes you from Berlin all the way down to Munich and some. And all of a sudden, the lights came on and the engine turned off in the middle of that. Luckily, I was fast enough to pull in the clutch, because if your engine breaks down and it basically blocks maybe even the rear tire at 190 kilometers an hour, that's a pretty dangerous situation to be in. So luckily I pulled in the clutch, but I could feel this sort of rumbling underneath me. I couldn't really hear anything because I was quite fast, but you kind of feel that something is wrong. Something was like breaking in the engine, basically, as I was pulling in the clutch, and I was trying to sort of rescue myself over from the left lane to sort of the side strip. And I was lucky that there was a bit of a bay that I could sort of ride into, and luckily I could weave through traffic. So of course I was pretty bummed being stranded 30 kilometers from Munich with all my luggage and my gear. And the first thing I tried to do is to see if I could start the engine up. Well, the first thing I was trying to do was actually put it into neutral again, because the bike wasn't in neutral yet, and I had issues doing just that. So somehow the gear lever just wouldn't move, and that gave me an indication that something serious is wrong. For those of you guys that don't know, the gearbox and the engine box is the same oil that's going through there. So obviously if there are any parts breaking in the engine and they're falling into the gearbox, that's probably the reason why I couldn't shift the gears. I tried to pull in the clutch to see if I could at least start the engine, but that wouldn't work either. The lights would come on, but the bike wouldn't start. So I called a towing service to get me to the nearest KTM dealer. There are 2 KTM dealers in Munich. There's one in the north. This is KTM North. That's where they took the bike to. And I was hoping maybe they could at least have a look at it and see how severe the damage is. I almost didn't have any hope that they could fix it. It just seemed like a severe issue. But of course, you know, you have to try, because I still had 2 weeks ahead of me and I needed the motorcycle for it. So they put it on sort of their diagnostics and looked at it and gave me the bad news that that was some serious damage, nothing they could fix in a short amount of time. So there I was, stranded without a bike, and especially for the Trans-Italia Marathon, you need an off-road capable bike, and it's very difficult to do that on a rental bike. The KTM dealer was a bit hesitant to see if I could take another bike, you know, for a few days to continue my journey. And those are all brand new bikes, they're show bikes, you know, to take out. And of course I turned it down, and I didn't want to break one of those bikes, you know, going off-road and sort of destroying the bike and having to sort of pay the large deductible on these bikes. So basically I was sitting there stranded without a bike, and I saw that I may not be participating in the Trans-Italia Marathon or the subsequent trip after that. Luckily, there were 2 great guys. First, Valle from Valle on Tour. He was the first one to offer me a replacement bike for the Trans-Italia Marathon. And then Stefan, who within 30 seconds after that also offered me another motorcycle so I could at least participate in that event. And luckily, Stefan, he has a 1290 Super Adventure R, so the exact same model from the same year. It's a bike that he normally does not rent out. It's a bit of a replacement bike, just in case one of these other bikes in his fleet of 20 motorcycles, if one of those bikes breaks down, he has a replacement bike for his customers. And that bike was equipped with sort of crash bars and a bash plate and some hand guards. So he offered me kindly to take the bike, and it was in Munich too. He has 2 locations. One is in Hamburg and the other one is in Munich. So he had it sitting in Munich. So within a few hours, I was very lucky to have a replacement bike, so I could continue to the Trans-Italian Marathon and the trip afterwards, which was really cool. Now let's talk about the KTM Warranty and the mobility guarantee. Now, for those of you guys that sort of buy a new KTM motorcycle, you know there's a mobility guarantee. Every major manufacturer offers that. So if you get stranded on the side of the road, the marketing says that, you know, if the bike is stranded, they will pick you up, they will repair the bike, they will give you a replacement bike. That's basically what it says on the high gloss brochure. So this was the first time I ever needed the mobility guarantee that KTM offers. And I can tell you it's definitely overpromised and underdelivered. So I had these guys on the phone and asked about if they would cover the replacement bike from Stefan, because that's a rental bike, and how much they would cover. And typically it's in a range of maybe 4 to 5 days that they cover, which, you know, is on the low end, but of course you can't expect them to give you a bike for 2 or 3 weeks if the bike breaks down. It would be nice, but I guess most of these guys don't do that. But the thing that really got me is that the daily amount that they would pay is, I think, just under 50 euros a day. Now a bike like this, a 1290 Super Adventure S or R, typically goes for 150 a day. So even if they would cover 4 to 5 days, at least I would expect that would be in the range of 150, same bike. You know, for 50 euros a day, I think you get a scooter, a 50cc scooter or something. You don't get a bike like this in a rental place. So that was a bit of a bummer. But they ended up paying their share, which is much lower than I was hoping for, but they did something, so it's better than nothing. Now, as for the warranty, now there's 2 things when it comes to the warranty. Is the warranty that the manufacturer offers, and then how the dealership comes into play. And I'm gonna elaborate on that a little more, because that's also something that I experienced the very first time with KTM. For those of you guys that follow the channel for a bit longer know that this is my 3rd 1290 Super Adventure KTM, and I had 0 problems on the first and the second bike. The first bike I had for 48,000 kilometers. The second bike I sold just over 30,000 kilometers, so I had no issues. I had this bike up until I had about 16,000 kilometers on it, again with no trouble at all. And this is the first time that I had an issue, any issue, and of course this one was a very big issue. So when it came to the warranty, I talked to the dealership in Munich and I said, guys, this is obviously a warranty claim. The bike isn't older than 2 years. It only has 16,000 kilometers. It's not a normal thing that the engine basically disintegrates in the middle of the Autobahn. So I was expecting this to be a warranty case, and they were a bit hesitant to take it on. They didn't say no, but they weren't really jumping on it either. Multiple times they asked me if I would prefer to have the bike shipped back to Berlin, which is it's a 500 kilometer ride, and obviously I had no idea how to get the bike up there. That was a bit off-putting, I have to say. I don't know why. I have an idea why that may be the case, but I'm just taking a guess here. But anyway, I said, no guys, I want to leave the bike here because it's already here. I'm going on my trip now. I'll be back in 2 weeks, and maybe you can start the paperwork with KTM to see if you can get the bike fixed. So I was on my tour and I was on the phone with these guys a few times, and nothing really happened. You know, even 3 weeks into it, and they called me again and asked me again if I wanted to bring the bike back to Berlin and bring it to my dealership in Berlin. I said, guys, no, because it makes no difference for me where it gets repaired. And I didn't want to deal with shipping a broken bike to Berlin and then having to deal with the dealership in Berlin. So anyway, they finally got the process started. So we lost the first 3 weeks just on that, unfortunately. But they got the process started. There was another thing that was putting me off a little bit. They said, well, did I do all my oil changes? You know, was there enough oil in the engine? And just like one of those things, you know, no, I had the service done in May, which was just a few months before, and I checked my oil levels. You know, I'm a frequent rider, so this is one of my frequent checks. And I actually have a photograph of that too. I was actually taking a photograph of my bash plate for some reason, and it actually shows the oil level. So that wasn't an issue. And I thought they may be trying to find something not to end up paying for it or something, but it didn't turn out that way. But it's just a few things that were putting me off a little bit. Anyway, they got the paperwork started a little bit late, but they got it started. They have a guy there that looks at warranty cases, a guy that comes in and looks at the bike and the warranty cases, and that was actually a really nice guy. We gave him a bit of a rundown what typically happens. Normally what happens is if an engine breaks, and Stefan in his rental place, he had the experience on 2 of his 890 engines that were also warranty cases with engine problems. What they would do is normally they would take the engine out, and the dealerships are not equipped to open an engine up and fix it. So what they would do is take the engine out, send it to a specialist, and the specialist opens up the engine, sees what's broken. Then they order the parts, they put the parts back in, put the engine together, put it on a test stand, and make sure the engine runs, and then it gets sent back to the dealer, and the dealer puts it back into the bike. So you can tell that this is kind of a lengthy project, and for Stefan, this whole process took about 3 months' time for both of his 890s, which is a very long time if you're renting out bikes for a living. It was a bit of a bummer, so I knew this wasn't gonna be a fast fix. So the guys in Munich, the KTM dealership in Munich, they also asked for a replacement engine because in the meantime they had opened the airbox and they saw there were lots of metal parts in the airbox, which indicated quite severe damage to the engine. And in addition to maybe just taking it out and sending it to someone that would open the engine up, I also contacted KTM directly. That was of a recommendation from Stefan that said in his cases there is a service email, support email that you can contact from KTM. He said go ahead and do that just in case, to see maybe if you can speed up the process a little bit. And normally I don't do that. Normally I also don't leverage that I have this channel and I do a video about it. I usually don't do that when I have any issues, but in this case I actually did. You know, I said I would at some point make a video about my experiences and gave him a lengthy email, and that I would hope that this would be fixed to my satisfaction. And it took a while for them to respond, but they did respond in a kind way and address all the issues of the mobility guarantee, of the fact that it may take a long time, and it'd be nice if they, you know, gave me a replacement engine if the engine is indeed damaged that badly. And then they got back to me and said yes, they will have an engine ready for me, and replacement engine, and the dealership basically at the same time told me the same thing, that there would be an engine waiting for me. KTM also told me that they had sent the engine out a few days after that. So we're in, I can't remember completely, but I think we're in week 4 or 5 at this point, where KTM said, okay, we're sending out the engine. Now keep in mind that the dealership didn't start doing anything until the first 3 weeks were up. So in that case, KTM was pretty quick, and they sent the engine out, and these guys told me, okay, they've received the engine, but it took another 1.5 to almost 2 months before the engine was then installed. So they took the old engine out, they didn't open it up, so I still don't know what the actual problem was with the engine, because no one has opened the engine and could take a look at it. I guess the only guys that know that are the guys in the factory at KTM. So they put the new engine in, and they didn't do it right away, and that's the other thing that is a bit annoying. If you have a warranty case, you are hoping that this would be fixed quickly. This is the end of the season, so it wasn't as bad as this would happen, you know, in May or something, where you lose out on your entire motorcycle season. But I guess most dealerships, just like the one in Berlin, they're pretty busy. They're low on qualified staff, so they've got a big backlog of just stuff that they have to do, and unfortunately you don't get put in a priority list, which is a shame. And I get it, there are other customers that are waiting for their bikes. So if a dealership takes an engine out, that probably takes them maybe 3 hours, maybe 4, and putting an engine back in maybe somewhere between half a day and a day. So it's a long time that they would have to spend with it, and I'm not sure if they get paid really well. I'm sure they have like standard rates for taking the engine out, putting it back in it. They may be doing it at a loss, I'm not sure. It could also explain why they were so hesitant to take the warranty case on, but I'm just guessing. I have no idea. Maybe you guys have a bit more insight. If you do, put that in the comment section if you're a bit closer to understand how the dealerships work. But that is my guess, that was kind of put on the back burner a little bit, and they weren't very keen to do it in the first place, and why it took so long. Anyway, they replaced the engine. By the time I was able to pick up the bike, we were in the beginning of December, and we had our first heavy snowfall. So I couldn't actually pick up the bike and ride it home. And that's the other thing that I was a little annoyed by, because they didn't offer to just ship it back to me to Berlin. It was up to me to bring the bike back to where I live. Now, this is a warranty case. I would expect at least that they would bring the bike back to me, and they never offered it. I asked, and it's like, no, that's not included in the mobility guarantee. I would have to pick it up myself. So I did, and again, I relied on Stefan to help me out, because he was on the way to Munich to pick up some of his bikes, and he had a transporter, and the weather wasn't good enough to really ride it back home. It was too cold, and there was definitely too much snow for that. So we loaded the bike into his van, and then Stefan took the bike to his garage in Hamburg. I don't really ride that much anymore in the winter time, so that was fine. So my motorcycle was sitting with Stefan for the entire season. Unfortunately, I had to undergo a knee surgery, so I couldn't ride early in the season. I was just able to ride about a week ago. We're in the middle of May at the moment. So I picked up the bike a week ago from Stefan with the new engine. The engine has about close to 400 kilometers on the clock now. I took it from Hamburg to Berlin, and now I'm riding it sort of the second time just to see how the engine goes. Engine sounds great. It's all good so far. So I'm glad they fixed it now. I'm glad that they put a new engine in. In the meantime, we have been in contact with the company that fixes the engines when they break during warranty time. It's not just one company. There is a few companies that offer that in Germany, but this company, they're located in Bavaria, and by their own information, they get about 30% of the warranty cases. And Stefan had an engine of a 1290 which had some issues with too much oil in the engine, and it took away some damage. It had 60,000 kilometers, so we actually took the engine out of the 1290, and I was able to be there. I was gonna assist, but I actually was just filming, so that video is coming out too as well if you're interested in what it looks like to take a 1290 engine out of a bike like this. And then we took the engine out and we brought it down to Bavaria to FP Engineering, and we asked these guys what their experience were with warranty cases, and they basically said that the 1290 engine is pretty robust. So from their experience, what they typically see in the first 2 years, it's usually not the 1290 engine. So for you guys that are concerned, this seems to be a rather one-off issue that I had. Still don't knowing what it is, but they said they don't see many of these engines in the warranty cases. Now the 890 engine, that's a different story. They see more of those. There's quite a few sort of threads online too that they had issues with the camshafts and issues like that. But even those bikes, they say overall they're not seeing a lot of engine issues, considering how many bikes KTM sells. So I guess you don't have to worry too much if you have a 1290 motorcycle, that this is a very likely thing to happen. I'm still curious to know what the issue is, but I probably will never know. So to summarize it up, the whole thing took a good 3 months. As expected, I wasn't expecting a quick fix. The things that I was annoyed with was definitely the mobility guarantee. I would have hoped for a bit more support in getting the replacement bike, getting a bit more paid for it. Also having KTM offer the sort of the transport back of my bike home, that would have been quite nice. And of course I would have liked to see a speedier service. There's only so much I guess the factory can do there, because most of it was with the dealership. Despite the fact that we're nice all the time, they were good in communicating, so there's no complaints there. It just took a little longer than I was hoping for. So in the end it wasn't a big deal, because it was the end of the season, and I was quite lucky that I had that replacement bike that I was able to keep even past my trip to the Trans-Italia Marathon and the Alps Tour. So overall I was pretty lucky that I knew the right people that could help me out. So I wasn't really too mad about the whole thing. And if you're wondering if this would sort of steer me away from KTMs because I had this experience, I don't think it will, not for the time being. I'm actually quite excited to ride this bike again. I love this bike. Obviously, I had it in a Trans-Italia Marathon. I get great trips with it. I took it to Norway. I went to Greece and Albania with it. It's an awesome bike. It performs really well when it runs well, and typically does go well. So yeah, I wasn't looking for anything else. Now, if this keeps happening, that may be a different story. But for the time being, I'm quite happy with this motorcycle. Anyway, long story. I just been meaning to make this video for a long time to give you a bit more detail on sort of what happened, and that's basically the entire story of it. Looking forward, there will be a video where we sort of yank out the engine of a 1290 if you're interested in it, and if things go really well, we might be able to film at FP Engineering when they open up an engine and see what happens when they take it apart, and also film what happens when they put it on this test stand, and to see when they basically put the engine back together again. And then if everything goes well, there may even be a video where we put the engine back into the 1290. So we'll see. Guys, thank you so much for watching. If you've got questions or comments, put them in the comments section. Ride safe and stay awesome.